Before we disassemble any of the gear train, we've got the shifter assembly off, we've got the extension housing off, we've got the slave cylinder off. But before we begin to disassemble the gear train I want to stop and really examine the operation of the transmission, review the power flow a little bit. This transmission is fairly typical in that when we get it to this stage, what we've got is a 4-speed gearbox in this main portion of the case, and then fifth and reverse back here in the extension housing. Fifth and reverse is a little bit more difficult to see, but it'll be the first thing that we disassemble, so we'll take a closer look at it there. At this point, let's look at the operation of first, second, third, and fourth gears. I've got turning my input shaft. You see that all of the speed gears on the main shaft are turning, but the main shaft itself is not. So I am in neutral right now, and I'm able to rotate the input shaft without the output shaft turning. But the input shaft gear drives the counter shaft. Every gear on the counter shaft is driven, so every speed gear, the first speed gear, the second speed gear, and the third speed gear are all being driven whenever we're setting there in neutral. But because neither one of the synchronizer sleeves are engaged, there's no power flow to the output shaft. My largest speed gear is first, and so if I move my 1-2 synchronizer sleeve back, I engage first gear, and now hopefully you can see that my output shaft is turning, and it's turning at a very low reduced gear ratio. I can shift first gear into neutral and then up into second, and now that speed gear is connected to the output shaft. And what's happening there, these dog teeth we call them, these teeth on the speed gear are attached to this synchronizer hub by the action of the sleeve. So when my sleeve is in neutral, neither the first speed gear or the second speed gear is connected to that hub, but I can connect one or the other. I can push that back, get it to line up a little bit, push that back, and I engage my first speed gear, pull it to the neutral position, or pull it forward and engage my second speed gear. I've got to get that into neutral before I can do the same action with third, and I engage my third speed gear. And fourth technically does not have a speed gear. The input shaft has a set of teeth on it, and when I move that synchronizer collar forward, that synchronizer collar bridges the teeth between my input shaft and my 3-4 synchronizer hub. This hub is splined directly to the output shaft, and so now my input shaft is splined to my output shaft. Notice all my speed gears are still driven. This is what we call a synchro mesh transmission. All the gears are constantly in mesh. I'm simply selecting what gear I want depending on which synchronizer sleeve that I operate. I've got a similar operation down below for fifth and reverse, but as I said, that's difficult to visualize right now. That'll be one of the first parts that we disassemble, and we'll see that here in just a few minutes.